Honorable Minister Chandra Badugurung of Ministry of Infrastructure and Transport, Dashus, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. My name is Sona Mengdin. I am the Media and Public Relations Officer at the Royal Institute for Governance and Strategic Studies. On behalf of RIGSS and everyone gathered here, we warmly welcome Mr. Saul Singer, his wonderful wife, Wendy Singer, and their 3 beautiful daughters to Bhutan and this dialogue tonight. We would also like to thank the Commissioner of the Royal Civil Service Commission, Dr. Tshering Cigay Dorji, for graciously consenting to our request to moderate the dialogue tonight. Dr. Tshering Cigay Dorji is a technology leader focused on digital transformation, innovation, and AI. He is also a blogger, columnist, and speaker with a wide range of experience in the corporate sector, managing and leading digital transformation strategies and initiatives. He currently serves as a commissioner of the Royal Civil Service Commission and as a member of the steering committee and IT domain lead for the Desung Skilling Program, which is Bhutan's nationwide youth skilling program. He started his career with Bhutan Telecom in 2000, and most recently, he led Bhutan's flagship IT development and technology incubator in Thimphu Tech Park. Mr. Saul Singer is the co-author, along with Dan Senor, of the latest book titled The Genius of Israel, The Surprising Resilience of a Divided Nation in a Troubled World. The Genius of Israel follows the author's best-selling book, Startup Nation, The Story of Israel's Economic Miracle. The book was a New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller and has been translated into over 35 languages. The title, Startup Nation, has become synonymous with Israel itself. Mr. Singer moved from the US to Israel 30 years ago and now lives in Jerusalem with his family. Mr. Singer's insights into how Israel became a global innovation hub have inspired entrepreneurs, policymakers, and leaders worldwide. His perspectives on the intersection of innovation, leadership, and national development are particularly relevant to Bhutan as we aim to unlock our potential in fostering creativity, entrepreneurship, and technological advancement. Today, we will explore and discuss an important topic: how can Bhutan become an innovation leader? A question that is not timely, but also significant as Bhutan embarks on its journey towards a knowledge-based and technologically driven society. In his book, Startup Nation, Mr. Singer writes on Israel's survival that has required the people to innovate permanently. It has required constant creation of new ideas, new companies, and new industries. And in the many opportunities and honor I had to interact and know him so far, he believes that Bhutan, too, faces unique challenges as a small landlocked nation. But like he mentioned, these challenges can be viewed not as limitations, but as catalysts for creative problem solving. With the right mindset, Mr. Singer is firm in his belief that Bhutan can develop a culture of resilience and innovation that turns adversity into opportunity. On our hike to the tiger's nest yesterday, I remember Mr. Singer making a very important point in one of our discussions. That is the bias we have with the word innovation, because he believes that innovation is more than just technology. It is about nurturing a culture of curiosity, risk-taking, and resilience. So with the question of how can Bhutan become an innovation leader posed in today's dialogue, I'm confident that his thoughts and ideas will inspire new ways of thinking about innovation and how Bhutan can position itself as a leader in this domain. I would once again like to thank Mr. Saul Singer and Dr. Tshering Cigay for their valuable time and look forward to a very fruitful discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now warmly welcome Mr. Saul Singer and Dr. Tshering Cigay Dorji.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Lempo Chandra Badur Gurung, Excellencies, Tashos, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine a small nation of 9 million people that, despite being forced to fight for its existence and security since its founding, has one of the highest GDP per capita in the world, and its people have among the world's highest life expectancies and lowest rates of suicide and substance abuse. Imagine a rich nation whose population is young and growing, while all other wealthy nations are aging and shrinking. Imagine a nation, despite being in a conflict zone, is ranked 5th happiest on the World Happiness Report of 2024. Imagine a small nation that has the highest high-tech startups and venture capital industry per capita in the world. The nation I am talking about is Israel. The story of Israel has useful lessons for all nations, especially for small nations like Bhutan, be it on how to promote a sense of community and belonging in a fast-changing world, or how to become more innovative. So to discuss how Bhutan can become an innovation leader, it is a great honor and pleasure for me to have with me none other than Mr. Saul Singer, the co-author of the international bestseller Startup Nation and the newly released book, The Genius of Israel. To quote a quote from one of his books, "When entrepreneurs succeed, they revolutionize markets. And even when they fail, they still keep incumbents under constant competitive pressure and thus stimulate progress. Entrepreneurship is the main engine for economies to evolve and regenerate." Unquote. In today's fast-changing world, innovation, be it in the private sector or in the public sector, is the only way to stay ahead of the game. Saul, I've read your 2 books, and it's amazing how beautifully you narrate the story of Israel. In one of your books, you say that Israel is a country built on story. As part of your opening remarks, please tell us what makes Israel's story so compelling and how it has helped shape the nation that Israel has become. Over to you, Saul.
Thank you. And it's really amazing to be here. It's been my dream and my family's dream to visit Bhutan. And it's hard to believe that we're here. And I think from the moment we walked off the airplane into the airport, we felt welcome. And we especially appreciate our hosts, Director Tshering and Sonam, who's been with us everywhere. And of course, the King, who we were so honored to have an audience with him and to learn so much from him about what this nation is trying to do. So I'm going to say a few words about Israeli society, about the strength of Israeli society, and how that connects with what makes Israel so innovative, and how it connects with Bhutan's story, because it's surprising to think about, but I really see similarities between Bhutan's story and Israel's story, and similarities between Bhutan's strengths and Israel's strengths. So I'll just start with a few slides. So one of the facts we talk about in the book is that Israel, surprising for a country that's surrounded by enemies, that's dealing with many difficult conflicts, actually has the lowest rate of despair as measured by something called deaths of despair in the United States These are deaths from suicide and substance abuse, drugs, alcohol. And these are the countries, the rich countries of the world. And you can see that Israel has the lowest number of these kind of deaths. And it's about 1/4 that of the United States, about half that of the Scandinavian countries. And we notice this is part of what made us want to write this book about what's going on with Israeli society. Why is our society seem to be healthier? What's going on here? And another very big way that Israel is different than all the other rich countries is our fertility rate. The average in the OECD among the rich countries is about 1.6. You can see the United States, Norway, France, South Korea is about the lowest in the world. And there's Israel at the top, about twice the average of the wealthy countries of the world. And this has enormous impact on society because it affects how old the society is. And this is, Israel is the youngest of all of these countries by far. Our median age is about 30. In Japan, it's closer to 50. And the black dots there are the median age in 2050. So the gap between Israel and the rest of the rich countries is actually just going to grow. By 2050, we're going to be about 25 years younger than countries like Japan and Germany and Italy. This is just another way to show it. This is called a population pyramid and shows how many young people are versus how many old people. And Israel is on the left. You can see Israel is mostly young people, and Japan is on the right, is mostly old people. And this kind of pyramid is happening all over the world. And the fact that Israel is young and growing, I think, is a huge asset for us. But the question is, how did that happen? And why is Israel, as a rich country, not like all the rest of the rich countries? And this is the World Happiness Report that you just heard about, where Israel is in the middle of all these Scandinavian countries like Denmark and Switzerland, Finland, and very different places than Israel. And the question is why? And it doesn't make sense even to Israelis, because Israelis are constantly complaining about what's going on in Israel. It's not necessarily an easy life in Israel. So why are Israelis saying that they're more satisfied with their life than practically any other country in the world? So this is the question, is why? And that's what the book is about. And I think it really comes down to three things that are human about us humans, is that we need connection, we need meaning, we need belonging. And, as I was thinking about this talk, one great similarity between Bhutan and Israel is that we both have been struggling with the question, how do you become more modern without becoming less human? It's a critical question. Modern society may be very successful economically, but as we saw with that chart about deaths of despair, modern society has been failing in even keeping us alive, in keeping us away from despair. And how are countries that are already modern countries in this problem, how are they going to get out of it? And how are countries like Bhutan going to modernize without getting into that problem? And I think that the core to understanding this question is to get to the bottom of what makes people happy. And there are many tremendous studies on this. There's a study that went on for 80 years at Harvard, where they watched people, young college students. They started monitoring them in the 1930s and just kept going, and to see what would happen with their lives, whether they would be healthy or successful and all these things. And the one thing that correlated with a better life was relationships, was the strength of their relationships, their friendships, their family, their community. And there are studies that show that loneliness is as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's crazy. But it's because that's how evolution built us. We weren't meant to be alone. Just like our bodies tell us when we're hungry, go get food, or we're thirsty, go get water. Our bodies tell us when you're alone, go back to the people. They tell us that because we get depressed. So I think the reason why Israel is so good, is so high on the happiness list, and has so much less despair, a lot of it has to do that we're very good at making human connections. So this is youth movements in Israel. I understand you have youth movements here in Bhutan also. I think there may be some people in the audience who may be part of a youth movement. And these things are extraordinarily important, and they've been very, very important for Israel to bring people together. And this many levels of connection, of friends, of family, but also of country. And this is why Bhutan's National Service Program, I think, is so important and inspiring. That's been a huge part of Israel's secret, is that we have a military, which we write about a lot in the book, in both books. But it's not just about military service. Military service in Israel is the pivotal point for young people's lives, because they graduate from high school, and instead of going into the university, they serve in the military for 2 or 3 years. And it's a very formative experience. And they learn many things, but some of the most important things are that you can't do anything alone. You have to work as a team. In the military, they call it a unit, but it's the same thing. And that it's not all about you. The first thing that Israelis learn in the military, they get to basic training, and they realize nobody cares about them. They realize nobody cares what they think or what they want. Suddenly, they are part of a larger body, and if that larger group doesn't succeed, they don't succeed. And that's such an important lesson. And they learn about service, about serving something larger than yourself. This idea that there's something larger than you is not a natural idea in the modern world. It's not a natural idea for young people, even in Israel. The natural thing is to think it's all about me. So it's very hard to teach people that it's not. But I think it's the key to a cohesive society. It's the key to a happy society. And basically there's a tension between kind of the Western idea of success, which is it's all about me, and the idea of service. People talk about a meritocracy. The West is based on meritocracy, meaning the more talented you are and the harder you work, the more you will rise to the top. That's the idea of meritocracy. And it's a beautiful idea. The problem is, it's very self-centered. And it implies that the people who succeed are the most talented and the hardest workers, which means that the people who didn't are not talented and not hardworking. And that's not a very good message. But Israel, I would say, yes, merit is very important, but it's merit that's measured by service, not by what grades you get, what university you go to. It's measured by what unit you're in, and the unit you get into, the the more difficult the unit, the harder it is, the more it's about self-sacrifice and difficulty and not just about you. So we quote in the book, this is an author who has written about many wars, and he's written about societies. And I think I like this quote about how modern society has become less human. He basically says that humans don't mind hardship. In fact, they thrive on it. What they mind is not feeling necessary, not feeling being part of something bigger than themselves. Modern society has perfected the art of making people feel not necessary. And that's why this national service program that you're a part of is so important. That's why DSP, about the idea of volunteering, is so important, and why it makes us happier and why it's so much better, important for society generally. And as we get into discussion, you'll see how important it is for innovation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Saul. That was very inspiring. So now, through some Q&A between us, we'll go deeper, and later on we'll open up to the floor. So if you if you have questions as you listen to us, please note down, and then later we'll give you the opportunity to ask questions as well. Now, the first question I would like to ask you is about the community vitality in Israel. We have this philosophy of cross-national happiness that we follow in Bhutan. And community vitality is one of the important domains under that. There are 9 domains that have been identified. And I feel that with the changes happening with modern development, with technology and all that, community vitality is being weakened. If you look at the past, especially in the villages, there's this deep sense of community, helping each other, volunteering. But now I think it's becoming weaker and weaker. Whereas in Israel, despite all the modern development, I feel that this vitality is very strong. You have this concept of Hebre, or Friday night dinners, and all these things. And in your book, you mentioned that the social graph of Israel is very simple. Everybody knows everybody. In fact, we say the same thing about Bhutan. So, what are some of the things that we can learn from Israel when it comes to keeping this community vitality alive? And I think that also links directly to your final quote, that people need to be felt, needed, or they need to have some meaning for them to contribute something to society. So how do we keep that alive? And we feel that sometimes in Bhutan also some people feel, oh, I'm not needed. So can you shed some light on that?
So I think in a way, first of all, I think the way you have to think about these things like solidarity in a society, that we're working against gravity. The force of modernity, basically, what is the essence of becoming modern? What is the societal change? It's basically rising individualism. In a way, is the biggest hallmark of modern life compared to the traditional world. And there are many great things about individualism. We like freedom. We like to be able to express ourselves. We like to be able to succeed. Israelis are also have very healthy individualistic instincts. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing startups, because startups are, a lot of startups, there's an ambition behind it. And ambition is a very individualistic thing, right? You want to succeed. So you want to be, the individualism has led to economic growth. It's led to many good things. And it's very important. But if you're only an individual, if your society has individualism with nothing to balance it, which is what's been happening over the years, it's only going one direction. then society becomes very sick. So the question is, if that's like gravity, that's the force of modern life that you're working against, how do you fight it? And you have to actually work to fight it, especially as you're becoming more modern, right? And what we write about a lot in the book is you could almost call them social technologies or social innovations that have allowed us to do this, and that are actually so much a part of Israeli society that Israelis don't even see them. They don't even understand them or notice them. Like, we have a whole chapter in the book about something called gibush, which is a hard word to translate in Israel into English, but it's basically the process of bringing people together. And Israelis are doing this all the time. Second nature. It's their happy place. They love, and this is, youth movements is one place where it happens very strongly. Is, when our kids first started going to the youth movements in Israel, it seemed to be that all they were doing is jumping up and down and yelling. It's because, that's all they were doing. It's just kind of yelling about how great their group was. But this group identity thing, it sounds, it may not sound very serious, but it's very important. And even within schools, this also surprised us, because my wife and I grew up in the United States. In the US, the classroom is not a unit. It's just a place where, the teacher comes in and out. In Israel, there's a class, and that the class must be unified. And if it doesn't have its own kind of identity as a classroom, then the teachers are upset, the kids are upset, the parents are upset, and we walk into this kind of meeting in the school in Israel and say, what are they talking about? Why is it so important that the class be unified? Isn't what they're learning important? But it didn't seem to matter as much as gibush, as this idea of bringing people together. And of course, it happens in the military, it happens in many places. So it's like a muscle that we're constantly training all the time.
Related to this, the other interesting thing that I read in the book was how people on the different sides of the political spectrum, having different views and demonstrating in different groups, but when they meet each other, they shook hands. I think it's amazing. Maybe just quickly tell us a bit about that. I think Bhutan is also a democracy, and sometimes people can be divided along political lines. But in Israel, it seems that people are willing, looking at bigger things. So you may disagree, but then on a higher level, you are all united.
Yes. Well, actually, we're going through a very challenging time now in Israel. The book was written before the war started, and as we speak now, there's tremendous kind of civil conflict with the very large protests against the government, arguing about how to handle the war and things, and we're in an incredibly difficult situation where we're divided to some extent while trying to fight a war. And that's a very bad position to be in, and a very dangerous position. And so what we wrote about in the book actually was a nice observation, I think a very important observation before, and now it's become an existential question. Because if we don't overcome the conflicts that are now going on in Israel, we're in big trouble. And I'm talking about, in a way, the challenge of overcoming these kind of social conflicts going on now is almost more important than our military challenges. Because if we're divided as a society, we can't survive. So, and the book just came out in Hebrew in the past week or so. And so I'm kind of in the process of promoting it there. And what I'm trying to say is that we have to stick together, but in order to bring ourselves back together, we have to understand what are our strengths. How do we have this solidarity that we may not see right now, but it's there. We have a reservoir of solidarity that we can draw on. Like one thing Israelis always complain about, we're losing solidarity. You probably hear this complaint here too.
Yes.
We're losing solidarity. But that's good news that you're complaining about that. Why? Because in the US and places like that, they can't complain about losing solidarity because they don't know what it is. There was nothing to lose. It's not a concept. You can't aspire to something you've never experienced and don't understand. You can't have a hope for solidarity. Hope requires something. It has to be something you can imagine. So other places can't imagine solidarity. Bhutan can. Israel can. And we just have to figure out how to tap into the things that bring us together, which is not easy, but it's much better than not even knowing what solidarity feels like.
Thank you. Now we will go towards entrepreneurship and innovation. So the first question that I would like to ask you about is about mission to the moon that Israel succeeded. A news bulletin from 5th April 2019 reads, Israel just became the 7th nation to orbit the moon. After slowly spiraling away from Earth for the past 6 weeks, an Israeli spacecraft known as Bereshit slipped into orbit around the moon on Thursday. So it is described in great detail in the book, but the idea of sending this spacecraft to the moon came actually from one young man, one young engineer. And then he just posted on the Facebook, I think, saying that who wants to send a spacecraft to the moon? And few other engineers responded to his post, and then he made a team of 3 young engineers, and then they approached the head of the space agency, right? And it's an amazing story. I would like you to tell us a bit about that. You know, how in Israel these 3 young people can get a meeting directly with the head of the space agency is amazing. And then after, I think it was after maybe around 10 years, they were able to finally send the spacecraft to the moon. And Israel, a small nation, became the 7th nation to have this spacecraft orbit the moon.
It really is an incredible story because you'd think if Israel sent a spacecraft to the moon, it would have been a national program. It was started by 3 men, engineers in their 20s, who decided they wanted to do this. And it became sort of a national project. It became, it got a lot of support from philanthropists, but also from the government. But these were just 3 engineers who had a dream and who liked rockets and thought they could do it. One of them had worked on nanosatellites just in school. He'd studied this. A nanosatellite is about this big. And he said, why can't we send one of those to the moon? Why can't we do that? And it was a lot harder than they thought it would be, a lot more expensive. But they did it, and it really is an incredible example of just what you can do if you kind of believe it can be done, and if you're willing to put everything you've got into it, and you're willing to take a risk, you're willing to fail. I'm not saying everybody should do this. I think sometimes we overemphasize the entrepreneur themselves and not all the other people who go into entrepreneurships. But whether you are the entrepreneur yourself or you're working with a new small business or a startup, it's all about, basically, there would be no innovation if there were no people who are crazy like entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs believe something that's kind of crazy, which is even though 80 or 90% of startups fail, I'm going to be the one who doesn't fail. Now, who's going to believe that? You know, it's not a rational thing to believe that you are that one. But without people who believe that, we wouldn't have anything. So it's a paradox that we're kind of relying on people who are very different from most of us to generate all the innovation. But that's how it works.
So, based on this interesting story, so it seems like in Israel, it's it's like normal for the government to listen to this kind of ideas and then support them. It may not be for all ideas, but so that kind of initiative exists, right?
The
From the
initiative
government
of
side,
supporting
from
yes.
the government to support the entrepreneurs like that with ideas.
Yes. So the Israeli government does try to support the startup system, but is almost completely a private sector phenomenon. And we were discussing this earlier, that it's very, very hard for government to support innovation for a couple reasons. One is that governments, the main thing the governments know how to do is spend money, like create a program. A government can maybe build a technology park. I know you're very involved in a technology park. A government can try to put some of the investment money in startups. But probably more important than those things is actually to get out of the way, is to figure out basically how do we make the lives of entrepreneurs who are doing something so difficult. There's so many ways to fail. How can government not be part of the problem? How can government make things easier rather than harder to do? How can government increase the chances of success? It's usually not so much by providing support, though it's good. It is good for governments to provide a positive atmosphere around entrepreneurship, to be supportive, kind of in body language, But I think we may be getting to this about government, about e-government.
So along the same lines, I would like to ask you, how can government not only support entrepreneurs, but also become more innovative themselves?
Yes.
How can the bureaucracy be more innovative? That's also a question that we are grappling with.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to say I'm very impressed with, as I was engaging with RIGSS and learning more about Bhutan and Zoom calls and interviews and so on, I learned about the NDI system that I understand is just rolled out, which was partly based on Aadhaar and other identification systems, but it seems to be maybe the best in the world. And that national ID system, digitizing your identity, is so important for all of the other innovations. All the other e-government innovations are essentially built on top of that. So the fact that you've done that and done it in such an innovative way is very important. So it shows that there is a technology element to reinventing government. But I think the bigger element to reinventing government is not technological. It's in mindset.
Okay.
And I think that's why everybody's so happy that you've become a commissioner, because you come from the business world. And why are people happy that there's someone from the business world in the civil service? And I think the reason is because we know the business world is more efficient than government. And why is that? Because there's a way of measuring whether you're doing a good job or not, whether you're making a profit. So everyone's accountable at the end of the day by a very simple metric. But with government, it's not so clear whether you're succeeding or not, and so on. So I want to throw out a possible way of making government more like the private sector. And that is to set a kind of a profit metric. But the metric is, how have I made someone's life easier today? How have I reduced the burden of the government on someone? How have I made life easier for an entrepreneur who has to go through much trouble to get permissions and forms and, so many things? So what if, there were contests in each government department for the most effective ideas to reduce regulation? I think basically the whole government should look at itself and say, really look at, essentially, it's a two-step process. One is, what regulations can we remove entirely? And second, what can we digitize? Remove, digitize, remove, digitize. That's all. But you could create an incentive system that produces that. In other words, you don't just tell people to do this. You say, you give awards for the people who come up with better ways of doing this. Within departments, you have competitions between ministries. Who can make life easier in measurable ways. In other words, it takes less time to open a business. And basically you can keep asking the question, is this regulation necessary? Is it really doing anything? Do we really have to ask for that form or not? Is there another way to do it? And if we do have to ask for that information, can we do it digitally and not with paper? If you keep drilling down and asking this over and over again and measuring people on whether they're doing this, you can get it done. You can make government more like the private sector.
Great. Thank you for that. Now, moving on, I would like to ask a question related to the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Bhutan. So I have been part of the ecosystem for quite a while, mainly as a supporter of entrepreneurs while working at Thimbu Tech Park. And while, the level of entrepreneurship has kind of gone up in recent years, one of the main challenges is that the kind of business ideas that our entrepreneurs come up with are mainly focused on the Bhutanese market. So the market size is limited by our population. And in recent years, I feel that two startups, I feel that I can call them startups, that I'm familiar with. I'm not associated with them. Maybe I would be. I'm not trying to promote them, but I thought that these ideas like Samu and EduCare are ideas which could scale up. Samu is a local version of Netflix, you can say, but they are just focused on the Bhutanese market, and that really limits the scalability. And the EduCare is an educational platform, but here they're focused on teaching, mainly on teaching and learning of Dzongkha, our national language. So there are limitations that our entrepreneurs face in that aspect. And I also feel that generally our entrepreneurs, when they think of ideas, I feel that they're mainly thinking of the local market. Whereas in Israel, the ideas are very big, and the startups get acquired for millions of dollars, and they always go global. So how can our entrepreneurs, be more global in their approach?
So first of all, Bhutan and Israel share an advantage of being small, because small countries can't rely on their local market. That is the startups, like you said. Israeli startups, are kind of global from day one. They often ignore the local market. It's actually, sometimes it's a problem. Sometimes we want their products and we can't get them because they're only sold in the United States.
Wow.
Yeah, but many Israeli startups use Israel, the local market, as a kind of test place to try things, and that's very important. But it's hard. It's hard to go global from a small country, but that mindset. Put it this way: if you're from a big country, it's harder to think globally than if you're from a small country. Because the big country, it's very hard to think beyond your local market. Your local market can keep you busy forever if you're from India. Or, how do you think beyond India? But the other, so the advantage is thinking globally from day one. And, but that, it does take time. It takes time to learn how to do that. And I think it will happen. But the other thing is, it's getting easier technologically to be global from day one, all the time. As the world gets more connected, and as also, like when Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook, he had to somehow scramble and buy servers and stuff to host Facebook, physically have the servers to host it. That was like his biggest problem, was how to get enough of these servers. Now, nobody worries about servers. You get it from Amazon, from the cloud, from Google, whatever, and now that's true about intelligence. You don't even have to develop artificial intelligence. AI is available from Facebook and other places for free, and you can just use it and build on top of it. And every day there are more and more tools and resources available for essentially free, close to free, or whatever. You don't have to develop them. You can build on top of them, and it doesn't matter where you are. And that's an amazing thing.
So, one of the other interesting things about Israel is the kind of high-tech startups that come out of there, which is really amazing. And of course, Bhutan is still nowhere near there. Just two questions related to that I'm interested in asking you is, how has Israel really been able to achieve that level of high-tech capability? Some background to that, and especially given Bhutan's current scenario in the innovation ecosystem, do you think there's something that we can do to bring it up further? Mainly from the point of view of maybe the government support, because there is, when nothing happens, I think the government has to step in, and that's what happens. So, can the government do something more, or do we need to do something more? This is a question that I...
Yes, but like I was saying before, in a way it's about doing less. Can the government do less? I think the fact that the government is wants to support innovation, and I think that there are ways, actually there's something that I've been advocating for a long time, that governments can do, that doesn't cost a lot of money, but doesn't happen naturally. And it is something that that can be added, and that is to connect Bhutanese entrepreneurs with entrepreneurs in other countries. Because I know that entrepreneurs who come to Israel, for example, or Silicon Valley, or anywhere where it seems like people are doing startups everywhere, is very inspiring. Because if you're an entrepreneur, it can be very lonely, because you're very strange. There's nobody around like you doing what you're doing. And if you come to Israel, for instance, in every coffee shop, everybody's got their laptops up and doing startups. I mean, it's like, and it's kind of normal. And just being in that kind of atmosphere, but also, I think that every country tries to do this alone. And I think that some of the strongest startups are multinational startups. Like Spotify had founders from, I think, 7 different countries or something. Spotify did very well. And the reason why that's so good is because each country has its own strengths. So people from different countries bring different strengths. So if Bhutanese entrepreneur were working with an Indian entrepreneur or an Israeli entrepreneur, that automatically makes them think more globally. It automatically brings other strengths to the table. And I think, entrepreneurs are very excited to learn about the problems of other countries. I can tell you that Israelis, another mark of an entrepreneur is they love problems. They get so excited by a good problem because a good problem is an opportunity, is a business. And of course, but it's important to know that many startups fail because they're solving the wrong problem. Finding the right problem is very important. But that's why, entrepreneurs are looking for great problems. And if you come to another country, you can see all these problems that, I didn't know about existed in Bhutan, or another place. I have ideas, I can solve them. So I think it could be amazing for the government to create groups, to bring groups of entrepreneurs to other countries to meet their counterparts in other countries. Simple thing, but it can be very good.
In Israel is not only high tech, but the Israel's television industry has really gone global. And from your book, Israel's television industry has transformed from a backwater into a hotbed of critically acclaimed programming. In just over 15 years, Israel TV content has become a global export with dynamics similar to Israel's tech industry. And Bhutan, we have a lot of young people here. And one thing I've noticed is our young people have a lot of talent when it comes to dancing and singing. And then also I think when it comes to art. And Bhutan's film industry is also quite vibrant, internally, at least, domestically. How can, we bring that up to become a kind of a global export?
Absolutely. I mean, the creative industries are just going to get more and more and more important as we see AI and robots progressing and taking away increasing amounts of work and things that people do. And we see that AI can make images and it can make all kinds of things and it looks like it's so creative and everything. But I think when it comes to creative industries, AI is actually just going to empower people more and more. Because creativity it's always going to be a layer on top of AI. Creative people are going to take those tools and do amazing things with them. And again, the fact that those tools are becoming better and better and more available just means that a creative society like Bhutan, it could produce a real industry. And it's not always about startups. So I'd say the creative industry, it's not really about startups, but it is a big deal. And if, Bhutan developed a creative industry, like you see kind of what's happened with Korea, with K-pop and all their creative stuff going on there. Some countries are just able to tap into things more than others. And I have a feel, one wonderful thing that you see in Bhutan that we saw again right in the airport is how much is hand painted, hand crafted. This insistence on doing everything by hand is a beautiful thing. And I think it's holding on to that is so important because it's very human, it's very creative, and it's very, it differentiates, it's a strength that Bhutan has. Just if you take the human traffic light that you have here in Thimphu, it's guy going on. That's crazy. That's a handcrafted traffic light. So, and it's instinctive in Bhutanese culture, and I think it's something to double down on. I think that every country will build its innovation system on its own strengths. Israel has its strengths. Startup Nation was its story. Bhutan has its own innovation story. Every country has their innovation story, but it's not like Israel's story. It's built on their own unique strengths. And the hard part of that is you don't see your own strengths because you take them for granted. People tend to see the problems, the weaknesses, and you don't notice your own strengths. So, in a way, the Startup Nation, the book, taught Israelis about their own strengths they didn't realize they had. And Bhutan definitely has its own story and its own strengths. And the innovation system needs to be built on that.
And talking of that, going through your book, I really felt that you have done a great service to your nation by writing these 2 books. You have made the Israelis reflect, and I'm sure these books help to bring the Israelis together. And probably a similar opportunity exists in Bhutan. So if some of our young people would like to write the story of Bhutan, how Bhutanese are united, So before I open up to the audience, I would like to ask you a last question. Risk-taking and fear of failure, I think, play into the entrepreneurship mindset or ecosystem very much. Here in Bhutan, I think there is this fear of failure and being looked down if you fail. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think in Israel, there is quite a good acceptance of, if you try your best and if you fail, still it's not such a bad thing. So can you tell us a bit on that and how important it is for the startup ecosystem?
Yes, so there's very good news about that. First of all, I don't know how many countries I've traveled to speak about Startup Nation, 20, 30, whatever. Every country I go to says, well, here in Poland or here in Brazil or here in China, we're afraid of failure. It's hard for people to take risks and to fail. Mm-hmm. So that's true everywhere. But the good news is that you don't have to change that. If you had to change it, it would be impossible. Mm-hmm. Luckily, you don't have to change it because every innovation ecosystem, every entrepreneur, startups, all that, they're like alien beings. They're like, think of Silicon Valley. So Silicon Valley, the culture of Silicon Valley is not the same as the culture of the rest of America. The culture there is much more accepting of failure. So what countries do is they have these enclaves of entrepreneurs. Often they're in a particular city or a particular neighborhood where a lot of the entrepreneurs like to be, probably because there's good music and food and stuff like that. And they like to be there. Maybe there's a university, a lot of artists. Mm. And that becomes this little enclave where it's more okay to fail. And you don't change the rest of the culture. So it's good news because you're seeing this in every country. It's really popping up everywhere, and it's popping up here. And it doesn't require changing the whole culture.
Mm. Related to that, one of the first stories you talk about in your book, Startup Nation, is Better Place. Founder of Better Place, he came with a great vision, which I still admire. And he raised up to $850 million, and finally it didn't work out. It was the dream of making the transportation industry into an electric one, for those who have not read the book. I tried to Google and see what he's doing now. I didn't get, but a lot of credit on how much electric car industry had picked up, I think goes to him, although his company did not make it.
Right.
Just if you have some updates on him and the company.
I haven't kept in close touch with him. He's tried some other startups. I don't know if it's succeeded. Actually, it's interesting because I think the biggest part of his failure is that he forgot he was a startup.
Really?
Yeah, because there's actually a danger in raising too much money. Because you start building a big company before you've sold anything. So, which is very, very risky. So it's sometimes some startups die of having too much money because they get too big too quickly and they can't sustain it. So that's kind of what happened to him. But so it just shows there's so many ways to fail. But it's possible to succeed, and that's what keeps entrepreneurs going.
Great. On that note, I'll open up to the audience. Please raise your hand. I think there is somebody with the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Saul Singer. I think that was not only very interesting, but there were very many lessons that Bhutan can learn from. I've read your book on Startup Nation and also some other books on water, and really so many inspiring stories from Israel. To make it short, I'm sure there are many other people who would like to ask questions. Two things really intrigue me about Israel is why do people like yourselves who've done fabulously well in USA and other countries, why do all these people return to Israel? What really draws you to Israel? And what keeps the Israelis united? In Bhutan, we have our king, which we rally around. We have our history, we have our culture, we have our ancestors, our families. But Israel being a relatively young country, what really unites all the Israelis together? I'm thinking about religion, but I'm sure there's more than that. I think it's not only just being Jews, but I'm sure there's many other things that unite the Israelis together, and what you told about connecting together and building a nation together. So I wanted to know these two things. What draws people? In Bhutan, we have many Bhutanese who go out rather than coming in. But Israel, as you showed from your charts, it's a growing country. The population is growing, which I presume is that there are not many people going out, rather there are people moving in. So could you share some of your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Israel's story is that the Jewish people have been praying and hoping for their own state for 2,000 years, since they were thrown into the exile by the Romans and the Babylonians. So for those 2,000 years, we've been praying to return to Jerusalem, which is where we live now as a family, where our children were born. So for Jews living outside of Israel, the idea of being part of rebuilding a Jewish homeland, a Jewish state, after 2,000 years is very inspirational. Now, I'm not saying that all Jews move to Israel, most don't, but I think that my wife and I, when we decided to move to Israel, we wanted to be part of this project. We wanted to be part of a work in progress. You know, both of us worked on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., where in Washington, there's a feeling like you're running the world, like all these staff people for members of Congress and stuff. There's a feeling like you're in the most important place. But you know, trying to affect the United States, which is an enormous country, or trying to affect the whole world is one thing. But coming to Israel, we felt we could be part of something that we could actually have an impact on. And we also wanted our children to grow up in Israel. They hadn't been born yet, but we loved the way children grew up in Israel. And it's because of these things, like these experiences that Israelis go through that brings them together. I think it's just a much healthier way to grow up. And also they come out of this culture of service with the feeling that they can do things because they've been through in the military and also before a lot of challenges, and they're given a lot of responsibility, more than in other countries. Israelis again, instinctively are trying to give their kids more responsibility, not to just do everything for them. Because we know that when they get to the army, we can't protect them. They're going to have to deal with it, you know. So if we protect them too much, then we're not doing them a favor. You know, they need to learn how to do things. And even when they're in the military, the way the military teaches young people to do things is actually by not teaching them. It basically says, this is what you have to do. Figure it out. And one of our kids, I won't say which, basically she was complaining. She couldn't see how she would ever be able to do, when she first got in, how she would be able to do what people who were just a year older than her were doing. And worse than that, nobody was telling her how to do it. She wasn't getting trained in what she was supposed to learn how to do. And it's like, oh, how am I going to do it? And she did. She learned how to do it. And then she was doing it, and then she learned how to teach it. That's what happened. You think it's impossible, you do it, and then you teach it. And Israelis go through this experience of feeling that of learning that they can do things that looked like they were impossible. And that is the most powerful thing you can do for life. And that's actually why I think it's the secret to things like DSP, National Service, to the Bhutan Baccalaureate, these programs that are trying to give Bhutanese skills. To me, the biggest skill is the skill of knowing that you can deal with challenges and responsibility. And the only way to do that is to throw people into it, is to let them figure things out, to have that kind of challenge, to have that kind of experience. And the more they do it, the more capable they're going to feel. That kind of capability, that kind of sense, there's a word in psychology called self-efficacy, is the greatest skill. From all that, basically, to me, this is a longer story, but the skills we need for life are that kind of self-efficacy that we get from challenges and responsibility, curiosity, and motivation. Because if we have those three things, we can learn anything we want. We're not going to learn in school what we need for 2 years from now, let alone 10 years from now. We have to be able to learn. We have to be the kind of people who can learn anything new all the time and believe in themselves. So it's really about obtaining these kind of soft skills that is becoming more and more important than any particular content that you learn.
It was a very insightful discussion. I have a question basically, or it's just an understanding. Given the entrepreneurship growth in Israel is an outcome of challenges that Israel faces, and that kind of challenges people are thrown into actually make them more innovative to find solutions. So how a welfare state where the people feel protected and nursed all the time, how does it affect entrepreneurship?
So, I think this is actually increasingly a problem, and it also is part of the process of modernization. The richer countries become, it seems, the more parents seem reluctant to let their kids fail, they for some reason, I think parenting as countries get richer gets more protective. I think that and it's very ironic because the parents who do this, they remember their own childhoods with nostalgia. They remember how great it was to have more freedom, and they remember how great it was that that their parents were protecting them so much. But they can't help themselves. They can't help themselves with their own children to be like everybody else and to be overprotective. So again, this is something where Israeli culture is fighting against gravity. of the modern world, and it is part of our culture that we try not to do that. And it helps us that our kids are going to go in the military, and we know that, and we know that we're not doing them a favor if we coddle them too much.
I think they get trained during the military service, right, to be more responsible, to be more innovative and things like that. Yeah. Whereas I think this professor here, I think is coming from that angle, because Bhutan here, actually, we are cared for by the government. We get a lot of free things, free healthcare, free education. So sometimes I think that acts as a disincentive for coming up with new ideas. Yeah.
There seems to be a role for everyone from the highest level to the grassroots level. But I'd like to hear your insight on the role of our youth in keeping this long enjoyed solidarity alive. Thank you.
So I think that youth movements actually, there are many, Israel has many different programs for different age groups that do similar things in a different way. But a lot of it is learning your own story, learning the Israeli story in our case, and doing it in a context where you're doing it together with people, with your peers, and you're outside of school. Being outside of school is very important because, unfortunately, because when you're outside of school, you're not being forced to learn this stuff. And so I find with our kids and many other, that there's a program in Israel that I think would work wonderfully in Bhutan, which is a gap year program. We call it Mechina, which means preparation. And it's right when young people graduate from high school at age 18, they defer their army service for a year, and they live with about 40 kids their age, and they learn about all kinds of things that people that age want to care about, like the meaning of life and philosophy and culture. And in our case, it's about Jewish history and about the Zionist movement that created the state of Israel, and why, how did Israel get there, and why, what are our challenges and all that. So this could be wonderfully adapted to Bhutan, where you learn Bhutan's story and you learn philosophy and you learn all these things, the big questions of life the young people like to grapple with, and the kids run it themselves. Very important. For instance, it's not just teachers. Like the kids actually have to go out and find their own teachers. They have to do a lot of the running of the whole system. Like plan trips. They go on trips around the country. They plan the trips. They have to find the buses. They have to do everything, even the logistics. Because it's part of this philosophy. We're not going to do everything for you. You have to figure it out. And the more you figure it out, that's like the most important thing you're learning, how to figure it out. And of course, it's bringing people together at the same time. These kids, because they're living together for a year, they find friends for life. And I find that whenever you learn something in a very immersive context with your own peers, it gets in your head much more. It has a much bigger impact on you than if you learn it just, I don't know, from the internet or whatever. You're learning it together. So, and I think also that Bhutan has some great things that we need to learn from, great ideas about, but there are many ways to do it. The key is understanding, and that it has to be done. And that's something that Bhutan has very strongly, a very strong sense that we need to preserve our culture. We need to not just spin out into, individualism and everything. We need to fight for this, and that's so important.
First of all, thank you for an insightful session. My name is Yong Youngjin Hamo, currently studying at the Royal Academy. So, as for my question, is the feeling of failure something we create, or is it something that is within us and it comes out when it is provoked?
I just missed if is
Fear of
what?
failure?
Is the feeling of failure something that
Oh.
we create, or it is something that comes out when provoked?
So fear of failure is the most natural thing in the world. What's unnatural is fighting it, is overcoming it. That's, people actually think that entrepreneurs like to take risks. That's not true. Entrepreneurs are not like thrill seekers. They're not the people who, do bungee jumping and stuff like that. Those people like to take risk. Entrepreneurs try to take as little as risk as possible, but they're willing. They don't like risk, but they're willing to take risk. That's a big difference. They're willing to take risk because they believe their idea should exist in the world so powerfully that they can't imagine not working on it. They can't live with themselves if they didn't try. That's kind of what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. And by the way, I'll say something else. The first step, so if you have a big idea, the first thing that happens is you start talking to people about your idea and they say you're crazy. Because new ideas sound like bad ideas to everyone, okay? So the first thing is your idea sounds crazy. It may be crazy. It doesn't mean it's a good idea because it sounds crazy. But all good ideas sound crazy. And then, so you have to overcome the fact that everybody is telling you you're crazy. But the next thing you have to do is you have to convince maybe 2 other people that it's not crazy. If you can't convince 2 other people to join your journey, then you're going nowhere. In other words, the first step as an entrepreneur is to find co-founders, to find a team, to find people who become as passionate about this idea and also show that it's maybe not as crazy as you think, that you're not alone. But all of entrepreneurs have plenty of fear of failure. They're not immune to fear of failure. They just overcome it.
Hello, my name is Gefel Seltram Namdak, and I also studied in the Royal Academy. So my question is, how do you see Israel's role in evolving on the global stage in the next decade? And what lessons from Israel do you think Bhutan can adapt to foster similar innovation, like moral lessons, actually?
So first, how Israel will develop over the next year. Yeah. So actually, I think Israel, it's all bets are off if we don't overcome this current crisis that we're in. I think we will overcome it. I think we will come together again as a society. In fact, maybe be actually stronger than we were before, more unified than we were before. That's a longer story. But assuming that happens, and actually it's very relevant because I actually think that during this conflict, a lot of the high-tech sector in Israel, they thought basically the good that they were doing for Israeli society was to be successful in building a startup. They were very patriotic about it. They felt that, the more successful we are, the better it is for Israel. But they weren't that involved in Israeli society per se. Now they've realized they can't ignore politics, for instance. They have to get more involved. And they're even more motivated for their startup to succeed because we have to recover economically and so on. We have to prove ourselves again. So a big question is where that goes. But technologically, Israel's in a very good position because we're very strong in AI. We're very strong in algorithms. We're very strong in the kind of ways, the places the technology is going. But I want to say something about technology and innovation. People think technology and innovation are the same, and they're very, very difficult. First of all, most things we think of technology innovation aren't even technology innovation, because let's say Facebook. Mark Zuckerberg didn't invent the technology. Airbnb, Uber, all these things, they didn't invent any technology. There were some things they did. They created software and so on and so forth. But the fundamental, they didn't come through with any new technology really. They came up with a new way of using technology. So essentially, it's business model innovation. It's what's happening is we're producing so much technology we can't hope to keep up with how much we can do with it. In other words, there's so much more things that technology can do. Basically, innovation is about figuring out what to do with what already exists rather than really developing new technology. And again, that's something that can be done everywhere, from anywhere, because you're taking technology from anywhere.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So I'm an exchange student from Royal Thimphu College, and I remember you talk about solidarity, and I think one of the ways to build that is to build a sense of identity through cultural heritage. And just like from an exchange student's point of view, I've observed that a key arena of dispute in Bhutanese society is the need to keep tradition alive versus the need to develop innovation, and it's framed as a this or that fallacy. And I think that the pervasiveness of globalization is like contributing to the perception that there's a loss of local culture and uniqueness. And I just want to ask a question, which is, how do you see opportunities to frame tradition and innovation going hand in hand as like synergistic forces and as like a way to frame the past, not as through the protectionist kind of documentation of relics, but actually as a fluid engagement with the present?
Hi, and to all respected guest, Mrs. Saul. So my name is Kelden. I work as a software engineer. So I have a question, so that mainly revolves around how Israel has been able to use their diaspora. I think one of the biggest reasons for Israel's economic success has been the fact that they've been able to use this big diaspora to not only bring back the knowledge, but also to connect Israelis who are living into Israel to the outside world. And I think here in Bhutan, I think everyone can relate to the fact that we have more and more family members, friends, who are leaving Bhutan for better jobs abroad. And so my question is, how can we, as Bhutanese, use Israel's previous case examples in order to bring this knowledge back to Bhutan, or to allow our knowledge to go outside of Bhutan? Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Singer. My name is Pramogan Namrachamso. I am a final year student in Yangtsinfu Higher Secondary School. And I actually wanted to ask, how is an educational reform important to foster a culture of innovation in the country? As an expert in innovation and entrepreneurship, what are some of the steps Bhutan could take in the education sector to possibly nurture a sense of entrepreneurial mindsets in young minds?
So the first question was about culture and development, and how Bhutan is doing, how it looks to me, I guess, how Bhutan is doing in trying to balance preserving culture with development.
Versus innovation, yeah.
Yes, and as I've said, I think it's so important, it's so amazing that I really think that when you think of what are Bhutan's strengths, what makes Bhutan unique, this is probably number one. is that Bhutan is so focused on this, because in order to do something, you first have to realize that it's something that needs to be done. I mean, you look around the world, and I can't think of any other developing country that's even trying to do this, and that has this tremendous consciousness that we have something worth preserving, that we need to figure out how not to destroy as we modernize. As I said before, the challenge is, how can we become more modern without becoming less human? Such a tremendous challenge. But Bhutan is trying to do it, and that's the first step. And I think that that's it's not possible to do it completely. And we don't want to preserve everything about traditional culture anyway. We do want to become modern in certain ways, not just economically. But there's so much to preserve. And in order not to become sick like so many modern societies, they're literally sick because they lost a sense of meaning. They lost a sense of connection. They lost a sense of belonging. So these things are super important, and the question is how to do it. And I think Bhutan has taken the first step, which is to try. The second one was about the diaspora. And yeah, I think that's an important point, is that, so a lot of countries complain that their best entrepreneurs are leaving the country. I hear that everywhere. And that basically is the first stage. It's very normal. First stage, a lot of people leave. Next stage, some startups and the economy in the country and the system become more successful and interesting, and suddenly those people start coming back, and fewer people leave, but also more importantly, some of them come back, and they bring with them skills and knowledge and kind of global thinking that didn't exist before. So they become a big asset. So don't worry too much about that. It can be a good thing. And the third thing is, how do you foster a kind of entrepreneurial mindset? And again, I think it's the more you expose kids to challenges and responsibility, the more entrepreneurs you're going to produce. The more people will feel capable that they can do things, the less afraid they will be of failure, and the more motivated also to innovate, curiosity, motivation, and this feeling of capability. Those are the things that we need in the world that we're going into. And you can't learn it by someone standing in front of a classroom. You can only learn it by doing, by being challenged. And by the way, if no one's giving you challenges, find them. Find them. Try to get challenges. Try to get responsibility. Because that's the way you're going to kind of prepare yourself for life and become more entrepreneurial.
Hello everyone, my name is Tshering Cigay Dorji, and I'm currently a 12th grade student at Yangtze High Secondary School. So having immersed in this insightful conversation, and one story which Mr. Singer had shared truly resonated deeply with me. It's about the young people who have come together to develop a satellite. So my question is, in what ways can young people partner with established leaders to propel innovation within the communities? And what collaborative approaches can they adapt to combine fresh ideas with experience insight, fostering an environment where both generations work together to create impactful solutions?
Well, I think that it's an interesting question. I think it's not easy to find necessarily mentors within government. That's hard, but finding mentors who have more experience, who are excited about trying to help you, who you can learn from, one of the big problems entrepreneurs have is often they don't understand the industry that they're trying to innovate for. They don't actually understand what the real problems are, the way that people in big companies big companies, they know they've a list of 100 problems they wish somebody would solve. But people outside don't see these, including the entrepreneur. Again, so you get to this thing about entrepreneurs trying to solve the wrong problem. So if you talk to people who are more experienced, who really know the areas that you want to be in, you should do a lot of that. And the more help they can give you, the better.
As you mentioned that finding the right problem is important. So in life, there are many different problems. So in your definition, what is the right problem we must find when we think about becoming an entrepreneur?
So we have to remember that that startups are for-profit businesses, right? So the right kind of problem is a problem that there are enough people that feel strongly enough about it that they would run out and buy that product. It can't be a problem that a lot of people have, but a little bit. It's better to have a problem that few people have a very big problem, have that problem a lot, because you want something that at least a good chunk of people are really going to be very excited about solving this problem. A lot of bad problems are ones that, it would be nice if someone solved it, but I don't really care that much. The best problems are ones that there are enough people that really care. Doesn't have to be everybody, but it's called a pain point. It's a real pain point for a certain group of people that would really looking for a solution to it, and they're willing to pay for it.
Right, I think with that we come to the close of the session. Any final words, Saul?
Well, I want to say that again, that Startup Nation is Israel's story, that we wrote Israel's innovation story. Bhutan has its own innovation story based on its own culture, and you is such an incredible story. We just visited Tiger's Nest yesterday. And we got all the way to the top, to the inside, and went into a couple of the temples there. And I'm not going to remember the names, I'm sorry, but we were in temples, one to the person who brought Buddhism to Bhutan, and the other to the person who united Bhutan. And, this is an incredible story. And you have a lot to preserve. You have a lot to build on. And I think of the Bhutan version of the Mechina, where young people are getting to, they're living together for a year and they're learning, they're getting inspired by Bhutan's story. And so I just wish that for you. And I also wish that we would work together. I wish that you would have a chance to visit Israel. I wish that more Israelis would come visit Bhutan, particularly entrepreneurs, and get inspired by each other, and that we could work together. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Your Excellency Limpo Chandra Bahadur Gurung, Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Mr. Saul Singer, our distinguished speaker, and of course his beautiful family, moderator Dr. Tshering Cigay Dorji, Tashos, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening. Bhutan is a nation under transformation, guided and inspired by the extraordinary and far-sighted leadership of His Majesty the King. And more than ever before, we are a nation hungry for new knowledge, ideas and insights as we embark on the journey towards making Bhutan a developed country within the coming decade or so. The vision is profound, the targets are ambitious, and the challenges are phenomenal. Yet, as His Majesty the King has time and again reminded all of us, the Bhutanese people have the audacity, the mettle, and the grit to overcome any challenge to accomplish what matters most for our country. We have proven that in the past, and we are on this formidable transformation journey to prove it yet again. And it is during such times that we need friends, well-wishers, and inspirations like Mr. Saul Singer, who brings with him an ocean of knowledge, ideas, and scholarship, some of which he has shared generously with us tonight. We are particularly happy that this conversation on innovation is happening at a time when our country, and perhaps the world at large, is brimming with excitement and curiosity about the creation of the Gilipu Mindfulness City, a 21st century metropolis and economic hub that is being built on the foundations of mindfulness, sustainability, and innovation. Well, I do not intend to summarize anything from what Saul and Dr. Cigay discussed, because I thought every point that was discussed was so eye-opening, so educative, and so profound to be summarized in a few minutes. Though I do want to emphasize the point that it will be imperative for all of us to reflect on some of his key thoughts, insights, and ideas as we go about our respective work, particularly in terms of how we can foster an innovation ecosystem, leveraging our unique strengths as a country and drawing from examples and stories of countries such as Israel. As a leadership institute and a think tank, RIGSS has been bringing several experts and thought leaders from around the world to share their research, expertise, and experience with us. And honestly speaking, if we do not reflect on them, if we do not discuss them hereafter, and more importantly, if we do not use them in whatever ways we can, then we will never be able to benefit fully from such intellectual discourses. I'm very hopeful that we are all taking so much away from the dialogue this evening, and that the thought-provoking ideas and insights that Saul shared tonight will help us immensely as we seek to tell a new story, a new Bhutan story, to provide global leadership in mindfulness, innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability to promote happiness and holistic human flourishing. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Saul for being so generous with your time, not only in being a part of this dialogue, but also for the other discussions you will be spearheading with relevant government officials and the startup community in Bhutan. We are also thankful to your wife, Wendy, and to your 3 beautiful daughters, Yadin, Tamar, and Noah, for visiting our country and for being here tonight. We do hope you take beautiful memories from Bhutan, spread the word about our country and all that's happening here, and more importantly, come back soon again. We are equally thankful to Dr. Tshering Cigay Dorji for so ably moderating the dialogue and making it so relevant and useful to every sector, to all of us in the audience. Thank you so much. Our sincere gratitude also goes to Minister for Infrastructure and Transport, Limpo Chandra, for sparing your valuable time with us this evening, despite your busy schedule. Likewise, I would like to thank all the dignitaries and other members of the audience for being a part of this dialogue and for really asking some wonderful questions. Our sincere gratitude also goes to all the individuals and agencies, particularly the Royal University of Bhutan and its management, for letting us use this wonderful facility and for providing all the necessary support. Last but not the least, with all our prayers for your continued good health and well-being, and our hope for more groundbreaking works from you in the months and years ahead that will benefit the world, we would like to offer a small token of appreciation to Mr. Saul Singer. Thank you, and touch the